Are you a new writer or perhaps an intermediate or advanced writer looking to improve your workflow? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to do exactly that. What's up, guys? Dave Jacobson here, best-selling author and book publisher. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you my top tips for essential tools and software that every writer should at least consider incorporating into their workflow. Before we get into the software piece, we're going to start with the basics and tip number 1. Every writer must have one of these. I get it. We live in the year 2025 as of the time of this recording, but there is something about pen and paper that's going to allow you to tap into a part of your brain that you otherwise simply cannot tap into. Why is that true? Well, think about it this way. During your early development years, when you're in kindergarten, even before kindergarten, or first grade, what are you doing all the time? You're using crayons, pencils, colored pencils, and you are creating using your imagination on physical paper, right? So there's something about the using that process of putting pen or pencil to paper that is very fundamentally associated with the power of your imagination. So my suggestion is this. Next time you find yourself having the proverbial writer's block and you just can't figure out which keys to type, consider picking up the old pen and paper and see if it gets the juices flowing. Moving on to tip number 2. Again, before we get to the software piece, tip number 2 is get yourself the miniature version of tip number 1. A small pad of paper. This is absolutely critical and essential, in my opinion, for any aspiring author. Why is it essential? Think of it this way. How many times have you been out and about in the grocery store or at the beach or at the park or in the movies, and you have an idea for a book, whether it be for a title of your book or for something to do with your character, or perhaps a memorable phrase or line that you would love to incorporate into one of your next books. Unfortunately, 90% of all of those ideas disappear by the time you get home and are long forgotten. And so that is where this tool comes into handy. If you have a pad of paper, a small pad of paper that, this is key, you can fit into your pocket along with a small pencil or pen, then you can get in the habit of writing down all of those ideas and keep them forever. So this, again, is essential. Now, with those basics covered, let's jump into the software piece of this video. I'm going to shrink my melon-sized head now, and I'm going to do a deep dive analysis of some of the most critical software tools you should consider using as an author. Starting with this one right here. This tool, as you can see now, is called Scrivener. So Scrivener is not 100% necessary, but it's a very powerful tool for writers. And the reason it's powerful is it allows you to organize your thoughts, your chapters, your scenes, your ideas, and your research all into a very neat document. So if you download Scrivener, this is the first thing you're going to see. There's going to be a tutorial, right, that includes key concepts and covers the basics. But basically, we're not going to go over all of that, obviously, right now. But I'm just going to show you how you can use it, right? You can create chapters easily. Chapter 2 of my document. Once you have a chapter in it, you can drag and drop, put scenes in it. You can create a new scene. Let's call this scene, I don't know, 7. Right? And so once that scene's created, you simply type the same way you would with like Word or Google Docs. And it operates very similarly. So the power of this, again, is the ability to organize your thoughts, right? You can have different folders and chapters. There's a research folder here where you can store images and research documents that you get from the internet. And then there's this other handy sort of place over here where, let's say you're looking at this chapter. Well, you can create a synopsis of this chapter, right? You can add notes for this chapter. You can add notes for the actual files themselves within chapters. So you can see right away that this gives you a lot of power to be able to organize that I find lacking in something like Word, right? So the downside of this tool is that it's not free. So it costs, I believe, $60 a month currently. And once you download it, it does give you a free trial, no commitments, don't have to provide your credit card. So I'll put a link in the description. Feel free to check it out and see if it works with your workflow. Again, not an essential, but a nice to have if you're interested. Let's move on to the next piece of software. And this one I love. It's called Microsoft Word. And most of us are familiar with it. But if you're not familiar with it, I'm just going to cover some basics really quickly. The thing I love about Word, and this by the way, is my preferred tool for drafting. What I love about Word is it comes with a lot of built-in features, right? You've got your spelling and grammar right here. There's a thesaurus. You can keep track of your word count and your character count and all of that stuff. There are review tools you can use. So let's say I create, the first sentence, and it's a terrible first sentence, right? But I can review it, and I can add a comment that says, I know this is a terrible sentence. This is a terrible first sentence. Revise later, right? So you can add comments to help you later on, and that way you can just move on and get over, not get stuck on one sentence. You can also use track changes, accept and reject, particularly if you're collaborating with others. And that can help you figure out, they can provide their edits and you can either accept them or reject them. Another feature I love is the old search and replace tool, right? So let's say you get halfway through your draft and you decide Johnny's not really a good name for my character. I'm going to change it to Igor, right? Well, with just a click of a button, you can change hundreds and hundreds of instances of the name Johnny to Igor and move on. So these are just some of the powerful tools you can use with Word. Again, the downside of Word is it's not free. Now, if you're a student, you might be able to access it for free or get it for a cheap discount. But typically, if you're an adult, then it's going to cost you maybe $100 to $200. So if you don't have it, then I'm going to give you an alternative that is free in a second, right? So stay tuned for that. But first, we're going to talk about the next piece of software I recommend, and that is Excel. So the thing about Excel is that it allows you to sort of map information in a way that's nonlinear. And so you would typically think that, well, Excel is great for, accountants and people who work with numbers, but what does it really do for writers? Well, this is an example right here, right? So I was working on a project and it was an academia middle grade fiction book. And in this, the main character's name was Howard, and he had all of these other characters in his class, right? And in order to keep them straight in my head, I decided, hey, let's build a Word document. And so now I have all of these characters in one place, so I can reference this document later and remember everyone's name. I've got a column for first name, last name, type of make-believe creature, male, female, what language they speak, and what cohort they were in their grade, right? So that's one way you can use Excel. Another way is you can use it for plotting, and specifically for plot grids. So plot grids are these is a concept that was popularized by J.K. Rowling. She used it to plot Harry Potter. She did it with a hand on a piece of paper, but the same idea can be used in Excel, or rather expeditiously. And so what do I mean by plot grid? Well, in your first column here, column A, you can have your main plot points, right? So you can have, I'm just going to highlight this so you know that this is this is actually a category. Inciting incident, right? And you could say what the inciting incident is, like, guy, eagle drops a bomb. I don't know. Just making this up, obviously. And then your first plot point, you can write that down, your midpoint, your climax, whatever, right? You have your main plot points here in this column, but then in column B and also in C, D, E, F, G, H, I, sky's the limit. You can have secondary plots, right? So let's say you want to add a love story. Well, we can say boy meets girl, and that happens before the inciting incident. Girl hates boy, right? That happens before the first plot point. And so you can build out these secondary plots and keep track of them, right? If the low numbers here are the earlier instances in time, you can think of this as a timeline. And so that allows you to create plot grids. So again, the downside of using Excel is that it's not free, but there is a free version called Google Sheets, and Google Sheets will do something similar for you. But we're not going to talk a lot about Google Sheets. Instead, we're going to move on to the next piece of software we're going to talk about today. And we've already talked about Scrivener. By the way, if you want to download that, you go to scrivener.app, right, and just click the downloads button. But the next software tool we're going to talk about is Google Docs. And what I love about Google Docs is a couple things. First of all, it's free, right? So if your budget is too low, which most writers' budgets are low, let's face it, then you might not want to put out $100 to $200 for Microsoft Word, right? But if you still need this kind of word processor functionality, then you can consider using Google Docs. Google Docs is free. That's the first thing I love about it, right? It operates similar to Word. I don't think it has as many powerful features as Word in my experience, but it is free and you can definitely use it to get the ideas across. And then another great feature of it is you can easily share documents, right, and collaborate with others. So with just a simple link, you can share via email. You can have other collaborators join you and take a look at your documents. So that's Google Docs. All you need is a Google account to be able to use that. And then now let's move into the next software tool that I recommend. At this point, we're going to get away from the basic tools like word processors and the things that you absolutely essentially need to be able to create your drafts. And we're going to move to kind of some of the more powerful editing tools that I like to recommend. And these tools aren't necessarily essential, but they're definitely very helpful. And make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to share with you a super powerful tip that's going to save you hours and hours and hours if you are a serious writer. So the next tool is Grammarly. You've probably heard about Grammarly before. The main benefit of Grammarly is it helps you, particularly if you're someone who's not very confident with their grammar, it helps you to do your line editing, right? So you can simply just paste so a paragraph, phrase, or whatever into Grammarly, and it will identify issues with your grammar. From a pricing perspective, they do have a free option which is great. So highly recommend if you're someone who doesn't necessarily have great confidence in your grammar abilities to check it out and see if it helps you gain that confidence, right? So, one of the most important things in writing is just feeling confident that you're expressing yourself in a professional way. This tool can help you do that, right? They also have a pro and enterprise version. Not going to get into that, but consider this if you want help with your grammar. The next tool I recommend for writers is ChatGPT. Now, everyone, unless you're living in a cave, is aware that AI is kind of taking over the world right now. There are some ethical concerns, particularly in the creative and writing space, about usage of AI. I think there is a time and place for using it. And my take on it is it's a tool like anything else, like Word, like Excel, like Grammarly, that can help you elevate your writing to a higher level, right? And as long as you're using it for that purpose, why wouldn't you use it? Particularly when there's tools like ChatGPT that are free, right? That said, if you're abusing it, let's say trying to write an entire book in all of your prose using ChatGPT and then claiming that you were the author of it, well, maybe now you're getting into some gray ethical areas, right? But what I like to use AI for is what I call advanced editing, which I'm going to get into in a minute, and also for brainstorming purposes. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say for the brainstorming piece, let's say I'm writing a middle grade novel, but I don't really know, what are some good ideas for names for my characters. So I could say, please give me, I say please, I like to be polite even to AI bots, but please give me 10 names of middle grade protagonists for my fantasy book. The protagonist is a male, right? So here we go. We've got Finley, Oliver, Jasper, Theo. But let's say we want to, dial this in a little bit more, and we say, please give me 10 names of middle grade protagonists for my fantasy book that takes place in a world full of dragons. Okay, well now it's going to give me a different list. Kay, Rowan, Iman has a magical knightly ring without being too heavy. Tobias, Griffin, Silas. These do appear more sort of appropriate for me given that use case. So you can see that there's a little bit of power here, right? And the sky's the limit with how you can use this to help your brainstorming, right? Another way that I really like to use AI, and I'm going to use the next tool to show you how to do this particular thing. And this is some juicy stuff, guys. This is really going to help save you hours and hours of time editing if you remember this trick that I'm about to teach you, right? And this is one of the ways that I've used AI in the past. So let's say you wrote a book and you're 3/4 of the way through writing the entire manuscript. It's a 50,000 word manuscript. And you're like, oh darn, I wrote this whole thing in first person, but now I'm realizing it really should be in third person. Well, guess what? That's going to take you hours and hours and hours to rewrite that entire thing, unless you use AI. So let me show you a trick here. Let's say you wrote this book. Your draft is called Treasure Island, and your name is Robert Stevenson, right? And you, by the way, this is an amazing book. If you haven't read this book, definitely read this book, please. But let's say, you wrote this entire book, which happens to be right now in first person. Well, I'm going to go over to Claude and I'm going to say, please rewrite this passage in third person instead of first person, right? And let's see it work. Squire Trelawney, Dr. Lively, and the rest of these gentlemen, having asked the young man to write down the whole particulars about Treasure Island. So the original says, having asked me to write down the whole particulars about Treasure Island. So you can see that it did, in fact, translate this into third person, right? So again, you cannot do that with simple search and replace using a Word document. It just doesn't work. There's no way to do that. Or let's say you wanted to change the gender of your main character, right? Well, search and replace, there's so many he's and she's throughout your entire document that aren't necessarily the gender of your protagonist, that it's going to screw up your entire work if you just simply search and replace he for she. But you can use a similar prompt that I just used here and use AI to do that very thing. By the way, if you're interested in using Claude AI to help you write books, this is a book that I recommend. It's called How to Use Claude AI to Write Books. I'm going to put a link to it in the description. Feel free to check it out or not. But anyway, guys, hopefully you got value out of this video. If you did, please consider liking, subscribing, and I will see you next time.